bother changing my voice. Now, I'm not like the Jews or the whites or anyone else. I'm not like the LGBT community. They've been causing me cognitive damage and experimenting with fumes and poison to change the way that I talk, to confuse you about the voice of God, if you will. The voice of God coming through the top martial artist ever. I mean, I don't think I have to explain to you why the English, the Germans, white people in general, the Jews, and everyone else isn't divine. It's a very sad day when I have to explain that. That's like having to explain why the shortest person in the world isn't the tallest person in the world. But it's worse than that. I mean, you know what profane is. You know what propaganda is. You know what psychology is. You know what stupid fairy games that people play. You know this. So now let's think about a martial art instructor who's divine, me, right? He's called a master, a teacher, okay? Other people, their students aren't that dedicated to their system or their teacher, and their teacher shouldn't be teaching in the first place. They just teach them to conform to the world and to be too afraid to do what's right, and they teach them techniques and how to defend themselves to some degree at best. And that is not the true essence of martial arts. The true essence of martial arts is obeying God. Okay, so when we think about this thing here, the Bible says in Psalm 106 somewhere, it says, who can proclaim God's mighty acts? God will march out like a warrior. God is teaching the descendants of the idea that the Israelites are superimposed on in the story. Okay, the spiritual descendants of the idea. The idea is righteousness and justice and loyalty to God. Okay, it could be using turtles as an example. It could be using trees. Okay, what you're supposed to get from it is in reality. Who are the people that God chose because they're righteous, not because they're merely Jews or because they're white or black, but because they're righteous, not because they're Nigerian or merely just because they're Igbos, but because they're righteous. Who can proclaim God's mighty acts? It is a Royal African Falcon martial art order. It's this particular type of Africans. We can look at, Joe Biden, the Pope, Donald Trump, and know that they're not that. Okay, we can look at, Ichabod Crane type people and know that they're not that. We can look at Hispanics and natives and Asians and know that they're not that. We can look at Ethiopians, everyone Ethiopian you've ever seen or heard of, and know that they're not that. We can look at Somalians and Sudanese, right? It's this particular group of Africans that is different than everyone else. Okay, so how absurd is it to say, okay, Usain Bolt, okay, every black guy's as fast as him? No. How absurd is it to say that? It's this particular type of person that is him, and he is not a martial artist. Far more skilled in martial arts am I than Usain Bolt is fast. Okay? It's that simple. There's nobody like me anywhere, and we know because of the characteristics, the spectrum of characteristics, that it would have to be a black person who would be chosen by God. Okay, just like we know it would have to be a human being. Okay, not a tree. Okay, we know it would have to be a Homo sapien, not a Neanderthal or Cro-Magnon or Denisovan. Okay, it would have to be a black person, a soul brother who is the essence of why black people's spectrum, even if you don't consider me, goes beyond other people's spectrum. Now, I don't care about race. This is just the facts, right? You pick figs from the fig tree, grapes from the vine. Okay? Other people, it's their culture. Rock and roll and corporate sabotage. It's their culture to act like mockers and to sabotage me, or to not have the heart to stand as a lion of Judah, so to speak, and say, no, I'm not going to participate in sabotaging the top martial arts ever, but instead I'm going to obey. They don't have that heart. You don't pick the heart of hearts from groups of people. They can't show you a single person with that heart. Nowhere in Western history with white people, Jews, and LGBT people do we see that heart. Now, why do I single them out? Because they're insisting that you look to them in their churches, in their corporations, in the military. They keep insisting and insisting. The vast majority of presidents, politicians, you name it, they insist fanatically and they're leading the charge to persecute me. So the right, fair, and just thing to do, the not racist, but actually right thing to do, is to shed light on this, bring clarity, okay, and to tell you that. See, the word racist is like the word rapist. And what is a rapist? It's somebody who's in some kind of criminal state of mind that rapes a female. What is continual cultures of continual rape by deception? It's every culture out there, but my personal culture with God. And my dad and my mom are blameless. It's every other culture out there because they refuse to properly define what a responsible relationship is and to live it and to live the reinforcing of it by not reproducing, by pointing to me, by obeying God through me. When they refuse to do that, they're leading by their actions. They're contributing. They're like clouds of smoke that are confusing you about where to go. Okay, a thick cloud of smoke that's blocking your line of vision, your line of sight. That's what they're doing. It's rape by deception, which is idolatry. If people know better, they're not going to date scum. They're not going to date mediocre people. They're not going to bring in mediocre children. They're not going to bring in people who aren't obeying God through me. They simply would not do that. Now let's look at this thing. A rock and roll chick is in popular culture is considered dumb. And she dates rock and roll guys who are considered dumb. Everyone, including the vast majority of rockers, agrees with this description. The movie Dumb and Dumber, okay? Why would a dumb female date Dumb and Dumber? Because she's dumb. Why would a dumb female date a rocker or a gangster with no higher cause or a rich person, who refuses to do the right thing, which is all the rich people right now? Why would they do that? Because they're too dumb to know better. Now, why are they too dumb? Write this part down. Because they weren't taught to be smart. They were taught their timetables, which takes some time to master. They were taught to ride a bike more often than not. They were taught to drive a car more often than not. They were taught to look both ways before crossing the street more often than not. They were taught these things that takes cultivation of brain function. But they didn't cultivate the wisdom to date correctly. And so it is with being in the military. There's plenty of people in the military who are dumber than a doorknob. But they're smart enough to stand at attention, to do push-ups, to shoot a gun a certain way, and so on and so forth, and to take certain precautions and follow certain protocols. The ones that actually should be followed, mind you. Because they were taught that. That's why in Proverbs it says you refuse the correction and instruction of God, and therefore you're going to hell. That's a core message in Proverbs. It talks about those who refuse. Mockers refuse to listen to the wise. They avoid the wise. They refuse correction and instruction. They refuse the commands of God. You see, they're training people who already have genes that are inferior to the top martial arts ever, but that's okay. But it's not okay to train them to be dumb enough to refuse to obey God through me. That is fucking stupid. And to have sex on that path, in that way, in that spirit, in that mentality, in that way of thinking, okay, is fucking pathetic. And I know for sure, after studying people for many years, as the most wise person that ever lived and ever will live. Because there's no way to be wise and keep breeding. There's no way to build to be as wise as I am. There's no way. I know for sure that they wouldn't be having sex the way they are if they were trained by people who don't live rape by deception and yoking themselves to the spirit of deceiving people by their actions, by their inability to face rape by deception and to tell the truth, and to tell the truth by their actions, by obeying God through me. So when they cultivate, let me leave with this last example. If someone was to rape a little girl, okay, even if they believed it wasn't bad, and they're to live that every generation, that culture, their brain function, every generation is being built toward despicable. When you're doing something wrong, whether you know it or not, you're cultivating inferior brain function. You're breeding inferior brain function. You're forging and producing generations of inferior brain function that gets worse every generation. More in denial. Denial is not the river of God, and it's not a river in Egypt. And so it is with them cheating me out of my right to lead and their social orders that are invalid, that are immoral. Thank you.